And we're live here for RaiderZone Episode 5 as, again, we're podcasting, as with everything going on in the world as far as COVID-19 goes. It makes the most sense so we can have more opinions, and we can do it from wherever we want, as we are here virtual on Microsoft Teams. I'm Will Brienza. Alongside me, I got Jacob Butar, Brennan DeVinny, and Ben Johnson-Bowers, as we bring you Episode 5. Last week, we did not have a show due to Monday being the second to final day of classes, but it seemed like a lot of things for Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes were due that Monday, so we decided to focus on the studies, and we'll get back at it this week with just an update of what's happened the past 2 weeks as far as everything goes in the world of sports. Guys, before we start, I want to ask you guys how you felt the semester went, finals week went, and how excited you guys are to be on Christmas break. Brendan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, good to be on Christmas break. It's nice not having to go back after Thanksgiving this year. I was looking forward to that, but strange semester. Glad that we got through it, staying on campus and in-person classes for the most part. So, yeah, finals went well, and so glad that you and I only have one more to go.
Yeah, only one more. Ben.
It's pretty nice. I mean, honestly, I didn't realize the semester was 14 weeks till we were about 8 weeks in. So that was a nice surprise, but it's definitely nice to have a nice month and a half off now where I can just kind of focus on coaching basketball and really nothing else.
Jacob?
Well, I got one down and 7 to go now. It was really interesting. It's not what I envisioned college to be, but like how Brendan said, I'm just glad we got through it, and hopefully things get better from here.
Yeah, and I agree. It's not the senior year I have envisioned. I'm sure Brendan agrees with me there. You know, you have 2.5 years because our sixth semester even got interrupted halfway through after the baseball trip. But glad I could see teachers, see friends. Glad to see everyone on campus following the guidelines. You know, I don't think any of my teachers ever had to discipline anyone for not wearing a mask or for coming to class sick. But it's tough. It's tough on everybody, not just us, also the teachers. It's a lot of change. So Brett and I have one more semester, most likely either similar to this last semester or even if things continue to get worse, we might go completely online, which would not be ideal as far as our last semester goes, but we'll chug through, and we'll always have this podcast, so we'll always be able to meet virtually with the sports team at least. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into the MLB. Obviously, the off-season in full swing. Free agency's been very quiet. We'll get into that in a second, but we'll start with recent news. Robinson Cano banned for the 2021 season after testing positive for PEDs. Brendan, I'll start with you. What does this mean for the Mets, and what does this mean for Cano's legacy?
Yeah, it'll definitely hurt their offense production. Cano, he hasn't been producing that the way that he has in his past, dating back to his Yankees days. But I mean, for his legacy, he's a World Series champion, 8-time All-Star, has won a Gold Glove, a Silver Slugger Award, MVP of the WBC. It's not going to hurt his legacy. It's not like he's Alex Rodriguez when, baseball fanatics think back to his career. It's going to be disrupted by his use of PEDs. I don't think that'll happen with Cano. He's a good guy on and off the field. I'm surprised that he was caught and that he's going to face a suspension. But I don't think it's really going to tarnish his legacy. It's already a stacked one as far as awards go and stats. So it's a shame that it's had to happen to him at the end of his career here. But I don't think we'll look back and think, oh, he used PEDs.
Ben.
Yeah, I really don't think it hurts him that much legacy-wise because he's been clean for pretty much his entire career. He's been suspended once before, but that was for a diuretic, so it wasn't a PED per se. So I don't think it hurts him too bad legacy-wise. I think for the most part, most people just remember the great plays that he's made and the production he's had across his career. So I don't think it hurts him too bad.
Jacob?
I agree with Brendan's take on how it might not necessarily affect the Mets that much, just because Robinson Cano really hasn't been producing offensively over the past few years. I do think it hurts his legacy slightly as far as Hall of Fame goes, but like how both Brendan and Ben said, he's put up the numbers, he has the awards, so it shouldn't hurt it that bad. He might just have to wait a couple years, because you know how baseball Hall of Fame voters, they tend to look at PEDs sometimes and hold that against the player. I think he'll ultimately get in the Hall someday, because like how Brendan and Ben also said, he hasn't really been caught for it in the past. So I think it's going to hurt it slightly, but it shouldn't completely destroy his legacy.
Yeah, and I agree with the take that it won't hurt the Mets. I mean, they're targeting Lindor. You get Lindor, you can move Ahmed Rosario over to second, or even Jeff McNeil over to second. The infield, if they add Lindor, is stacked even without Cano. So I don't think it affects the Mets as much. And even if they don't have Lindor, even that trade doesn't happen, like I said, you still have Rosario and McNeil that can fill in, and then you have younger talent. Obviously, adding Lindor would make your infield stacked, but they still have young talent in that infield and prospects they can bring up. As far as Cano goes, I agree with what Jacob said. We'll get into the MLB Hall of Fame here in a second as we get into full swing there as far as voting goes. Will he end up in the Hall of Fame? Most likely. He'll just have to, like you said, wait a few years rather than being a first or second ballot Hall of Famer just because of this one tarnished piece of his legacy. But overall, I still think he has the accolades that Brendan touched on to get in, even with this one little hiccup on the road. And with it being towards the end of his career, too, I don't see it affecting him too much. Moving on to free agency, like I said, it's been very quiet. Out of the top 100 free agents, only 4 have signed. We've already talked about 3 of them. So in the last 2 weeks, only one top 100 free agent has signed with the team, and that was Charlie Morton, as he signs a 1-year contract with the Atlanta Braves for $15 million. Jacob, I'll start with you. How much does this signing help the Braves when it comes to trying to win the National League?
Well, I mean, adding a guy like Charlie Morton certainly helps your chances. I don't know necessarily if it puts them over the top to win the National League, but it's definitely going to help that pitching rotation out. But what I would mainly like to see the Braves do to really put them over the top is bring back a guy like Marcell Ozuna, or add some other pieces that can replace Ozuna maybe. But yeah, I think that this definitely helps the rotation out. It doesn't put them over the top to win the NL necessarily, but it doesn't hurt them, and it certainly does help them though.
Ben?
I think it helps them, definitely strengthens their pitching rotation. So I think when you add that into the young core they already have there with Acuna, I think they've got a good thing going. And the only team that should stand their way next year is the defending world champion Los Angeles Dodgers.
Mm-hmm. Brendan?
Yeah, it definitely helps out that rotation. It's a pickup that they definitely had to get to add that rotation. I mean, now you look at having Max Fried, Morton, you already have Mike Soroka, Drew Smiley, solid pitchers that necessarily didn't have a great postseason last year to get them to the World Series. But now as you strengthen that rotation and get more innings out of your starters like Morton will give you, it's definitely a stepping stone to get to the World Series. Like Jacob said, you definitely need to bring back Ozuna. I don't think the offense will look the same without him next year if they don't bring him back. So that's definitely a priority I think that they need to focus on. But I would love to see them pick up another starting pitcher in free agency because, I mean, that was the blemish on their run last year, that they just did not have the pitching to get past the Dodgers.
Yeah, I like the 2 points you touched on, Brendan. One, you named a few guys in that rotation. Smiley, Fried, both great years. Soroka, I mean, they missed him all last year, so really adding Morton, they're adding 2 key pieces of that rotation because they'll have Soroka back next year. And I think that will speak numbers as far as what it means for the rotation, because obviously we saw the bats were getting it done throughout the postseason and the regular season. And the pitching got it on the regular season, but a little fall off there in the postseason. Adding those two players, like you said, Charlie Morton usually gives you 6-7 innings every time he goes out there, and then Soroka's your ace. So adding those two guys, I think, will be huge for the Braves. The Dodgers are always going to be that team that gets in your way in the National League. They extended Mookie Betts until he's retiring, basically. And it's only a matter of time before they extend Bellinger and other big names like that. But this definitely does help. That was a great series we saw between the Braves and Dodgers, so maybe the Morton addition is what they needed. But only seeing next year play out will speak the difference. And then you never know with injuries either. You could add Morton, but if Acuna goes down, your team, takes a hit there. So if everybody stays healthy, I think this is a huge signing for the Braves. And I think having Morton go 1 to 2 games in an NLCS could get you that little hump over if you have Soroka and him going 2 games each. That's 4. That's all you need. So I do think it's a big signing. He is 37, but, he didn't look any different last year. So kudos to the Braves dipping into free agency as not very many teams have. Hopefully, as we get into December, which we usually do see in December, more of those free agents go off the board. Hopefully we'll have more to talk about in the weeks coming as far as free agency goes. But that will take us to the 2021 MLB Hall of Fame. So put the ballot in front of you, and we're kind of just going to break this down who you guys think might get inducted in 2021. So as far as guys returning, Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, all returning for their 9th year, all receiving over 60% of the votes last year. Omar Vizquel comes back for his 4th, Scott Rowland for his 4th, Billy Wagner for his 6th, Sheffield for his 7th, Todd Helton for his 3rd, Manny Ramirez for his 5th, and it's not getting any prettier for him as he only received 28.2% last year. Jeff Kent in his 8th, looking really bad for him. Andrew Jones 4th, Sammy Sosa in his 9th, only at 14%. I'm going to say he does not make the Hall of Fame. Pettit in his 3rd, Abreu in his 2nd, and then first-year guys, we have Mark Burley, A.J. Burnett, Michael Kadire, Dan Herron, LaTroy Hawkins, Tim Hudson, Torrey Hunter, Aramis Ramirez, Nick Swisher, Shane Victorino, and Barry Zito. And for the listeners, to get into the Hall of Fame, you need to receive 75% yes votes from the voters. And then if you receive less than 5% in a year, you are taken off the ballot, never to return. And if you make it 10 years without getting in, you are taken off the ballot, never to return. So a guy like Bobby Abreu, he's in his 2nd year, made 5.5%. He just made that cutoff to make it on the ballot this year. And Curt Schilling, Clemens, and Bonds all getting over 60% is huge as far as getting close to that 75%. So guys, with that being said, Ben, I'll start with you. Which players do you see potentially being inducted in 2021? It's usually about 2 to 4 guys. Last year we saw 2. The year before we saw 5. So kind of varies on who they give yes votes to, but whose year is 2021?
I feel like it's Barry Bonds' year. He's right there on the edge. He needs like 2 more electors to say yes to get him in. So I think this might be the year. And if you look at the totals consistently, he's been going up over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this might be the year he finally gets in. And then Curt Schilling as well, also in his 9th year.
Brendan.
Just for the heck of it, I'll throw in 4 guys. Out of the 3 that this is their 9th year, I do agree with Ben. I think Barry Bonds will be a surprise to everyone that he gets in. Got to throw in my guy Omar Vizquel from the Indians, a Gold Glover. This is his 4th year, so I'll say he'll get in. I do like Gary Sheffield, and then looking at these other guys, Sammy Sosa, I think he'll this is his 9th year.
Mm-hmm.
I think his chances are going to be tarnished by his post-career incident, but I like guys like Andy Pettit and Bobby Abreu and Mark Burley. Some that this is their 1st or 2nd or 3rd years, but just historic careers that will probably help them get in.
Jacob?
I feel almost 100% confident that Kurt Schilling's going to make the Hall of Fame this year. I really do believe in his 9th year that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I agree with Brendan. I'd love to see Omar Vizquel in there. I think he has a strong chance, but I'm not going to fully commit to saying that he'd make it. Also agree with the Andy Pettitte take. Manny Ramirez, I don't know necessarily if he'll get in, but maybe his chances increase within this next coming year. And when you talk about Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, I honestly think both of them should be in there, but kind of like how we were talking about with Robinson Cano, do the voters look past all the PED usage? When it comes to Bonds, I think for sure you look at he used it not necessarily in the beginning of his career either. In the beginning of his career, it was just as dominant as the end of his career potentially too. So I think Barry Bonds should definitely get in there. Mm-hmm. Clemens, I don't necessarily see him coming in just yet. He probably waits till that last year. But Bonds, I think, has a slightly stronger chance than Roger Clemens. But really the only guy I feel 100% confident on is Kurt Schilling.
Yeah, I feel 100% confident on Schilling, too. Receiving 70% last year. He only needs 5% more. I think Clemens and Bonds, if they don't get it this year, they definitely get it next year. I think those two will be Hall of Famers eventually. Vizquel's another guy I like for this year. He's getting a lot of hype. I mean, probably one of the best shortstops to ever play the game defensively and still hit for a decent average for a lot of his career. Some of the quickest hands you'll ever see in the middle infield. I think his 4th year might be the year. Andy Pettitte's another pick I like, the starting pitcher. 3rd year, only 11.3 last year. I think he takes a huge leap this year. And as far as first ballot goes, I think the only guy on this list that has a chance, I don't think any of them are going to get in this year, but I think the only one with a first ballot chance is obviously Nick Swisher. I'm just kidding. Mark Burley's obviously the only starting pitcher I think with, or the only player with a first ballot chance. But even then,
Nick Swisher on the ballot. How did he get on the ballot?
I don't know. If I'm looking at this, I'm going to imagine that Aramis Ramirez, Nick Swisher, Shane Victorino, maybe Barry Zito, maybe Torrey Hunter all off next year. I don't know if Torrey Hunter might get 5%. He reminds me a lot of Bobby Abreu. He might get that 5.5%. But Ramirez,
Torrey
Swisher,
Hunter, I understand. I would, in a few years, throw him into the Hall of Fame. I mean,
yeah.
He had a great career.
But Ramirez, Swisher, Victorino, and Zito, I don't think I see them next year on the ballot. But no, I think Burley's the only first-year chance. Great, dominant pitching career, iconic, perfect game. But overall, I think those top 4 guys in voting last year could be the 4 guys we see getting in this year. 2 of them maybe next year, but Schilling and Vizquel are 2 guys I'm pretty confident in. But that's usually announced in January, so as I get voting updates, whenever I can find them, we'll update you guys and the listeners, and see who will be enshrined into the 2021 MLB Hall of Fame group. But that does it for the MLB. Like I said, MLB pretty dry right now. No free agents. But as we get into December and the winter meetings, maybe we pick up. That will take us to the NBA now, as there's a lot going on over the last 2 weeks. I'm sure you guys have seen, obviously, the NBA draft last Wednesday, and free agency started and took off. A lot of signings, a lot of trades. I didn't list everything here because that would have been about 4 pages, but I listed big-name players, big-name trades, and we'll just jump right in. We'll start with the NBA draft since we didn't get to talk about it last week. There in front of you guys, the top 10 picks. And then obviously there was 50 other picks, but Anthony Edwards of Georgia goes first overall to Minnesota. Wiseman second to Golden State. LaMelo Ball to Charlotte third overall. And then the rest is history. Jacob, I'll start with you because I know you're dying to talk about the NBA draft. What are your thoughts on the top 10 NBA draft picks? And who are your winners and losers of the draft?
So as far as the top 3 picks go, I love the Anthony Edwards selection. I'm glad that Minnesota didn't cave into drafting LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball could very well be the best player in this draft, but he does not fit with D'Angelo Russell. That would be a horrible defensive backcourt. So Anthony Edwards really does help the Timberwolves right now as far as fit goes. I feel James Wiseman was also a great pick for Golden State in this case because Golden State does need a center. I'm glad they didn't cave into LaMelo Ball too. There are a lot of people saying that they could have, with Klay Thompson's injury going down. However, I think Wiseman's going to be a better fit in the long run. I was surprised to see Tyrese Halliburton not taken top 10. He was widely regarded as right behind LaMelo Ball as maybe the second best point guard in the draft, and he fell all the way out of the top 10. I don't think that should have happened. And so my winners and losers of the draft, though, the team that drafted Tyrese Halliburton is, I think, the biggest winner so far, and that's Sacramento Kings. He's going to be a solid backup right now for De'Aaron Fox, and he can even play a little bit of the shooting guard position, so he could potentially play with Fox in some sets. And then the two other winners, I have the Philadelphia 76ers, just because they drafted Tyrese Maxey, which is a point guard that they needed, but it's more for their their draft day trades when they acquired Seth Curry and Danny Green. Those are shooters that they really needed on the perimeter. And then the Clippers didn't even make a pick, but I have them winning because they traded their pick for Luke Kennard, who can help their bench out. And then my losers, I have the New York Knicks on here. And I'm not saying anything wrong about Obi Toppin. I think he'll be very good. But as far as the Knicks go, they need a point guard. And you had guys like Halliburton available. You had a couple different point guard options really available, and they chose to go with Toppin. And then to add on to the frustrations, they added a shooting guard instead of a point guard in Emmanuel quickly later in the draft. So I don't think that they did what they needed to do. And also the Houston Rockets, just because they made a big trade early on where they traded Robert Covington for a draft pick to get youth that they desperately need. And then they ultimately traded that draft pick away for another future pick. So they're not starting the youth movement, which they need to start in Houston. They need to get some young guys in there with that old core. So I think they missed a golden opportunity to really make a solid selection at 16. And that's my NBA draft rant. I'm sorry it took so long, but I've been dying to talk about this.
Brendan, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the top 10. The top three picks did not surprise me. Wiseman is going to have a little more playing time now that Klay Thompson is out for the year. They definitely did not obviously need to consider Thompson being out when they drafted, but I think LaMelo Ball will do just fine in Charlotte. I was surprised that Obi Toppin went down as far as he did. I thought Cleveland was going to take him. Really didn't expect him to go all the way down to 8. But I mean, every team definitely drafted due to their needs. Okongwu will do just fine in Atlanta. Okoro will definitely help Cleveland defensive wise. But looking at winners and losers of the draft, I think Minnesota definitely drafting Edwards will help them out immensely. Now that you have Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, will definitely improve their offense, which was just dismal last year. I think one of the major losers was Milwaukee. They didn't pick until the second round with Jordan and Wara and Sam Merrill, but I think that's not going to help them out to get to the next step in the playoffs. Milwaukee's been stalling in the playoffs the past few years, and I don't think they did anything to better their chances of getting to the finals, and I don't think they've done anything in free agency so far to better their roster. So,
Ben.
I think the Edwards pick's a good one for Minnesota. They already have Karl Anthony Towns. They have their big. If you're picking in the top 10, you're looking for a starter. So they didn't need James Wiseman there. So I think going with a guard and Anthony Edwards was a good pick. Golden State needed a big, so James Wiseman makes sense and fits there. I think he should have an impact there as a rookie. LaMelo Ball, honestly, I think you could flip a coin on whether he's going to work out. He looks like he has the talents and the abilities to succeed in the NBA. So he might be able to make something work in Charlotte, but Charlotte's also got a history under Michael Jordan's leadership of not being able to get much further than like the first round of the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. I think Okuro's a good pickup for the Cavs. I think defensively he's going to be a real big help for us. So I think that makes the Cavs a winner of this draft. And then I was to pick a loser. I think for the most part, a lot of these teams made solid picks that addressed their individual needs, whether it was a big if you're Golden State, or defense if you're the Cavs. But I think a loser's got to be Obi Toppin. He's going to the New York Knicks. Like, he's got to be the loser of the draft. He's going to a perennial loser with bad management that just can't seem to get anything right.
So my thoughts at the top 10 picks, I think everything makes sense except for what Jacob said, the top-end pick for New York. Halliburton was a surprise, not going top 10. I agreed with that. And then, other than that, everything made sense. Okongwu falls, and now he joins a stacked Atlanta team, which we'll get into. Atlanta, I think they're a winner of the offseason right now, like the ultimate winner of the offseason. They might have the biggest turnaround as far as the season goes. One big winner for me is the Pelicans. So now you look at this Anthony Davis trade, all right? Anthony Davis trade is now turned into Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, the 8, 17, and 35 pick in 2019. They get LA's 21 pick if it's top 8. If it's not top 8, they get their 22 first rounder. They get LA swap in 23. And then they also get an LA first in either 24 or 25. And they also got rid of Solomon Hill's huge contract. So this Davis trade, yes, it happened last year, but they added on to that trade this year. And it's making them a winner. It seems like every draft, every year, as they have the short term and now they even have the long term as far as looking forward goes for the Pelicans. I agree. The Kings a winner getting Halliburton late. They just did sign Fox long term, but maybe you work out a way where one of them plays the 2. You move Buddy Hield to the 3. You have options. It's definitely a huge piece for the Kings going forward. Even if he plays a 6th man for a while, it's a pretty darn good 6th man if you ask me. Ultimately, I agree. The Bucks a loser. Not adding a lot, especially with Antetokounmpo potentially becoming a free agent this next offseason. But overall, like Ben said, everybody addressed the needs they needed. Atlanta, we'll jump into free agency and offseason moves now. I think the Hawks, they're off and running. They had Trae Young, they had Clint Capella, they had John Collins, just overall a decent team. Then you're adding guys now like Bogdan Bogdanovic and Gallinari, and then you draft Okongwu, and you're like, where does he even fit in? But you also have Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter. This team is young, hungry, and looking good. But we'll jump into overall. So I'm going to go through key moves, signings, trades here so far in free agency. Gordon Hayward's on the move as he's traded to Charlotte for 2 future second-round picks. The Kings add Hassan Whiteside to a 1-year deal. The Hawks, like I said, signed Bogdanovic to a 4-year deal worth $72 million. Bam Adebayo agrees to a 5-year extension with the Heat. Ingram agrees to a 5-year extension with the Pelicans. The Pelicans also get Steven Adams and sign him to a 2-year extension from OKC. Cousins signs a vet min deal with the Rockets for the next season. Dario Saric agrees to a 3-year extension with the Suns. Lakers add Marc Gasol to the roster for 2 years, and now both Gasol brothers have played in LA. Tatum agrees to a 5-year extension with the Celtics, and Mitchell agrees to a 5-year. Donovan Mitchell to a 5-year with the Jazz. Ibaka's on the move as he signs a 2-year contract with the Clippers. The Celtics signed Tristan Thompson to a 2-year deal. Carmelo Anthony re-signs with the Blazers. Rajon Rondo signs with the Hawks for 2 years, $50 million. Another big move for the Hawks when you talk about depth on that team. Fred VanVleet agrees to a 4-year extension with the Raptors. Joe Harris agrees to a 4-year extension with the Nets. Harrell, he's staying in LA, but with the Lakers as he signs a 2-year, $19 million deal with the Lakers. Dwight Howard's going to Philadelphia on a 1-year deal. Gallinari joins the Nets, 3 years, $62 million. De'Aaron Fox agrees to a 5-year extension with the Kings. Warriors acquire Kelly Oubre after the Thunder acquire him from the Suns. And then Andre Drummond exercises his player option and will stay with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whew. That's a lot. Like I said, that's not even all of it. That's just the bigger name players, bigger name trades. Jacob, we'll start with you again because I know how much you love this. Your thoughts on this chaotic offseason, and who are the offseason winners and losers?
So, I mean, this offseason has definitely been chaotic, but it's definitely, I don't think, not been as chaotic as past off seasons, and that's just because the free agency class really isn't that strong. The trades are amazing. I love the trades this year, like Chris Paul going to Phoenix. That just blows my mind. Steven Adams also leaving, going to New Orleans. That That's also a big trade. So I'm loving the trades. Free agency, wasn't expecting much out of it. But if I had to pick the winners of the offseason so far, like how we've all been touching on, the Hawks, I think what they did is absolutely perfect. So they added 2 more young guys in Bogdanovic and Okongwu. That helps their young core out. But then they added veterans like Rajon Rondo and Danilo Gallinari to really come in and hopefully elevate the Hawks. I don't necessarily think they're going to contend in the East, but the East is so bad they could probably snatch like a 4 to 6 seed potentially if this team all comes together. It's all going to be about how Trae Young develops, how John Collins develops, how all those young guys really develop.
Mm-hmm.
I think both Los Angeles teams won in their own ways. So obviously the Lakers, you got Dennis Schroeder, you got Montrezl Harrell, and you got Marc Gasol. So they got significantly better. And you can look at it like the Clippers lost Montrezl Harrell, but in a way which you also have to look at, Montrezl Harrell was not happy with the Clippers. He was causing some friction in the locker room, so you take that out and you add Serge Ibaka, who's a pretty darn good center too, so he's definitely going to help them. And even a guy like Luke Kennard's an upgrade for their bench. So I ultimately think the Clippers are going to be okay, and they're still going to be able to contend with the Lakers. And then I love what Philadelphia did still. As I touched on earlier, they acquired the shooting that they need, and most importantly, they got rid of the horrible experiment and the horrible contract of Al Horford. That is just a perfect move for them. That's going to help them in the future, in future free agencies. And like I said, they get the shooting that they need, which makes it even better because they dumped Al Horford away for a shooter in Danny Green that they needed. So that's a good move on their part. And one that nobody's going to want to talk about as a winner is the Oklahoma City Thunder, because they said they were going into a rebuild. Now they're fully in a rebuild. They traded Dennis Schroeder away for draft picks. They traded Chris Paul away for draft picks, traded Steven Adams away for draft picks, and they acquired Kelly Oubre and Ricky Rubio, and they never even suited up for the Thunder, and they still got first-round picks out of them. And Sam Presti's known for being a good guy when it comes to the draft. Heck, he drafted Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, so I think he's going to knock it out of the park with these draft picks. So he's a genius for this. But the losers of free agency, I would have to say the Charlotte Hornets. Makes absolutely no sense to sign Gordon Hayward to as long a contract as they did, and for $30 million is just I just can't believe Michael Jordan did that. I shouldn't say I can't believe it because he's such a bad owner, but he shouldn't have done it. Like, you just build on the young talent. I don't understand the thinking there. Toronto, I think that they're gonna take a step down slightly. They're probably not going to contend anymore because they lost both Gasol and Serge Ibaka. Aaron Baines is a nice signing for them at center, but I mean, Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol were just so big and important for them. And Milwaukee, I think, is also the loser. But I think that Drew Holiday is a solid win now pickup. I really like that move. And I even think some of their signings, Bobby Portis, Torrey Craig, Bryn Forbes, they're all good bench players, so I think that they can ultimately help their bench. But what I hate is that they signed DJ Augustine, who's about 33 years old, to a 3-year, $21 million contract. That makes absolutely no sense. They got rid of George Hill, who was one of their best three-point shooters in the NBA, and that's what the Bucks offense all works on. I think losing Eric Bledsoe is going to be okay because he wasn't that good of a three-point shooter. But the big reason why they're losing, Giannis hasn't signed the contract yet. And this reminds me so much 10 years ago, since I am a diehard Cavs fan, of when the Cavs went all in, fully loaded, trying to get everybody to get LeBron to stay, and he wouldn't commit to a contract extension, and there he goes. He just walks out the door. I think that's what we're going to see in Milwaukee. I hate to see it for Bucks fans, but unfortunately, that's the way the NBA goes. So that's my take on the offseason so far.
The crazy part is a lot of people are saying Giannis's landing spot could be Miami, so it could be a very similar situation when you look at it that way as well, Jacob.
I can definitely see that happening, and the interesting part of that, though, Milwaukee isn't going to be as bad of shape as Cleveland because Miami now, since they signed Bam Adebayo to a big contract extension, I was reading they would have to trade guys like Tyler Hero away to Milwaukee, Kendrick Nunn, so they have to trade a bunch of young guys away. So Milwaukee's not getting fully screwed. Obviously, they're going to be way worse without Giannis, but they'll at least get something back now if Giannis ends up going to Miami.
Yeah. Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, well, Jacob pretty much summarized the whole thing, but I'll touch on some things that interested me thus far. The Lakers adding Marc Gasol and Markieff Morris and Montrezl Harrell. just make them so much more dangerous going into next year. I mean, that's pieces that can definitely help them defend their title. And looking at their contender in the West, Golden State, they had James Wiseman. They had Kelly Oubre, Ken Bazemore. But, I mean, is that going to be enough? Losing Klay Thompson. I was listening to Stephen A. Smith one day, and he said, like, you need both Steph Curry and Klay Thompson to win the West, or even win the finals. I mean, you can't have just one. That's one player and two players almost for Golden State. So yeah, they definitely get better a little bit through free agency. But I mean, to contend with the Lakers in the West, I don't think so. But yeah, and then the other team that we've talked about, Atlanta. I mean, they're definitely going to contend in the East now with Milwaukee and Miami. Adding Bogdan Bogdanovic, Rajon Rondo, Danilo Gallinari, and now you already had Trae Young there. Definitely a dangerous team that I would not want to go and face in the playoffs. I mean, if it's a surprise team in the playoffs upcoming year, definitely going to be Atlanta, because Milwaukee didn't get any better yet, at least. I don't think Giannis can take that team by himself. We've seen that in the playoffs already, almost losing to Orlando in the first round and then bouncing out in the second round this past year. Just Atlanta, I mean, that might be a dark horse in the Eastern Conference this upcoming year, and definitely going to be making the Eastern Conference a little more competitive, because I don't think Los Angeles has any competition with Golden State this upcoming year.
Ben?
All right. When I look at all this, I think Atlanta. I really do think Atlanta is going to be a team to watch next year. They made some good moves, and I think the biggest move for them that makes them probably one of the biggest winners of the offseason so far, Rajon Rondo. Even though he is getting up there in age, getting a player with that level of just basketball IQ and experience, I think it's super valuable. And it's going to pay big dividends for them when they get in the playoffs next year. Boston, on the other hand, I think their title window's closed now that Gordon Hayward's gone. I think they'll be a good team. Obviously, they have Brad Stevens, still say probably the best coach in the league. They'll continue to make the playoffs and be competitive, but I don't think they'll be able to actually get to the top of the mountaintop, at least not without picking up another star. And I agree with Jacob. I think Giannis is probably going to end up leaving Milwaukee. I think it's going to be a LeBron situation where he has to leave to go someplace else to learn how to win and be a champion. I don't know if he'd come back, but I think he's definitely going to leave once his contract's up. And I think that's pretty heavily in the cards right now. And then the Los Angeles Lakers over in the West have to be the biggest winner in that conference. I mean, they picked up Marc Gasol for pretty cheap, went to the Los Angeles Clippers and said, this is my sixth man of the year now, and took Montrezl Harrell and signed him. Got Wes Matthews, re-signed KCP, re-signed Markieff Morris. So they kept their core together. They kept their team pretty much entirely intact, save for Rajon Rondo, and then just added. And all within the salary cap, well within the salary cap. So that's impressive. The Los Angeles Lakers are running it back next year, without a doubt in my mind.
So we got a bold prediction from Ben. But obviously Hawks, Lakers, yes, big winners. A team I think everybody's forgetting about is the Suns. I think adding Chris Paul makes them a winner. We saw what they did they're in the bubble, go undefeated, just missed the playoffs. So I think adding Paul to that team with Booker and Ayton now makes them a playoff contender. And then Golden State, initially a loser when they lost Klay Thompson, but a winner adding Kelly Oubre. You can move Wiggins or Oubre to the 2 now. to fill that slot, that void. And you'll still have, Curry, Wiggins, Oubre, Green, and Wiseman can still get you into the postseason without a doubt. Now, are they going to contend for a championship? Tough to say, because like you said, you got the Lakers. The Suns added some power. You have teams that are scrappy, like the Jazz, the Mavericks. You still have the Clippers, who have Kawhi and Paul George. The West is just a very tough league, where if you don't have two superstars, it's tough to win. They still have a superstar in Curry and young stars, not superstars, but great players. So we'll see what they can do with that. Losers, I think the Cavs are a loser. The only thing they've done is they got Drummond to say yes to playing with them for a lot of money. They added JaVale McGee. So now their three biggest contracts are all big men. And I don't think they added enough to the team. I don't know. I don't like the JaVale McGee acquirement. We'll see. Maybe the young guys take a leap as far as Garland, Sexton, and Porter go. Okoro, we'll see what they do in the year coming. But right now, the Cavs have not really impressed me this offseason. Other than that, there's still a lot to happen. There's still not very many big names out there, but there's still some names out there that can help your team in a big way. And we'll see what happens before the season starts. It's getting close. December coming right around the corner. About 3 weeks away. So the NBA season is knocking on the door, as that will be all for NBA. And now that will take us to boxing. So before we start the segment, I just want to ask, did you guys all watch Fight Night Saturday night? You just turn your mic on and say yes if you did, no if you didn't.
Mm-hmm. I saw clips of it on social media, but I'm not going to pay $50 to watch. What
great minds think alike. Yeah.
Great minds think alike. I didn't pay either. You got to do the streams. You find streams online.
The illegal ones.
Not really.
Twitter.
Not really. Yeah, Twitter has streams.
Reliable.
You just watch Twitter streams. Like, you don't have to have a TV to watch the fights. You just throw up Twitter on your phone. Everybody's posting the videos. Yeah, it's not live, but like.
Did B-Dubs have it on?
No, because with B-Dubs closing at 10, it's not really profitable when the two best fights are at 11 and 12.
You guys closed at 10, yeah.
So, but we'll talk a little bit about them. The first big fight. Jake Paul knocks out Nate Robinson in round 2. Jacob, we'll start with you. You're a basketball guy. Nate Robinson goes into the ring and gets knocked out by YouTube sensation Jake Paul. What are your thoughts on this?
All right, what blows my mind is the one guy that represents the NBA is a 5'9" dude. Like, we got a bunch of 7-footers in the league, and the first NBA guy that goes in a boxing ring is 5'9". I think that they're like really hating on Nate Robinson too much, though, honestly, because I got to give him credit for going in there, honestly, because that takes a lot of courage. So I'm not necessarily going to rip on his performance. I kind of expected him not to do good because he's Nate Robinson. He should just stick to winning slam dunk contests, but his boxing career should be over after this. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, Brendan or Ben, do you guys have anything to add about the Paul versus Robinson fight?
I'm surprised he lost, to be honest.
Really?
I'm surprised Jake Paul won. I mean,
Jake
Nate
Paul
Robinson's
has
like 5'9", but he's an athlete.
Yeah,
you gotta imagine.
Jake Paul also has a little more fighting experience. Jake Paul actually practices boxing.
Yeah.
I think Robinson just said, "Oh, I can box you," and jump in the ring. Like,
I know Jake Paul grew up like as a boxer and went to his local ring and everything. So, plus he's much taller than Robinson in stature. Definitely has a better upper body strength than Robinson. So, I'm not surprised. I mean, that was kind of a mismatch going in, I think.
Yeah, and even if you hate Jake Paul, you can't deny the fact that he's got a little bit of athletic ability in him. And the fact that he's been boxing his whole life, he's in great shape. I wasn't really surprised. Yeah. I was surprised that Robinson went through with it, honestly.
I got to rip on Jake Paul one more time, though, because Jake Paul's over here talking crap like he comes from the mean streets of Cleveland. My guy grew up in Westlake, Ohio. For crying out loud. That's like the richest part of Cleveland, and he's over here talking crap. Like, he also hasn't fought
a professional boxer. Both guys he's fought have he's
put
like,
him in the same ring as Floyd Mayweather. He's gonna.
Did you hear what he said? He called out Conor McGregor on live TV.
It's crazy.
This dude wants all
That
the smoke.
I would pay to watch that. I would pay to watch.
He thinks he
Paul
has the
against
edge because McGregor's MMA and not boxing. I'm like, okay, Mayweather had the edge because of that, but you would not have the edge because of that.
No, I would want to see Jake Paul fight Ron Artest if anybody in the NBA. And Ron Artest's heyday, I think Ron Artest would absolutely destroy Jake Paul in the ring.
I would give you that.
Isn't Ron Artest the guy that punched the fan at the Mouse in the House?
Sir.
Yep.
He's got experience for that.
He's got experience. Mean right hook. No. Now, on a serious note, that fight there was a good fight that night. Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., 54 and 51 years old. They go the distance and it ends in a draw. I personally believe Tyson won, but they called it a draw. It was just an exhibition, so there was nothing on the line. And if you guys got thoughts on this, after seeing that fight, I believe Tyson should think about maybe fighting a little bit more. He looked athletic. He looked in good shape, and like I said, I thought he won the fight. But you guys' thoughts overall on this fight? Good for the sport, and Tyson comeback? ?
Yeah, I don't know about a comeback. He definitely lost a lot of weight going into this fight, which I think he definitely doesn't have the same ability as he did in his heyday. But, you're talking about two legends of the sport, Tyson and Jones. Just great to see them show that they still have it, which they definitely do. Showing that you can definitely have a long-lasting career in the sport. Which the sport definitely doesn't have any big names anymore. People don't watch it like they used to when Floyd Mayweather and Muhammad Ali were in their prime. But definitely something that the sport needed. To have Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. stay relevant is good to see.
Ben or Jacob, anything?
Yeah, I think Mike Tyson should come back for a couple fights. I agree with Brendan. I think the sport needs it. Boxing and MMA, UFC are sports that need golf too, that need stars, and probably NASCAR. You can throw them in there too. You need stars to really drive people to watch them. And with boxing and MMA in particular, because that's the whole thing. You get them on pay-per-view to watch that fight, and you'll get a couple undercard fights that you probably don't care about. You're not going to pay attention, but you're doing it for this one guy to see him fight. I think Mike Tyson should come back for a couple fights. He looks great, which is incredible considering he's been done for, I think, off the top of my head, about like a decade and a half, something like that. He's been out of the game.
Mike Tyson versus Tyson Fury. Tyson versus Tyson.
Yeah. I think he should come back for a lot of exhibition fights myself. The one that I'd really like to see, and I don't think this guy would probably sign up for it, just imagine if Evander Holyfield came out and did an exhibition with Mike Tyson, just how amazing that would be. That would just bring all the boxing fans back because
yes, it would.
I'm not saying boxing's necessarily terrible now, but it's definitely, I don't think, as good as it was when those guys were in the ring together.
Yeah.
So, if you bring Mike Tyson back and you manage to convince some other old schoolers to come back and just fight him one time, I think that's perfect for the sport of boxing. But yeah, I think Mike Tyson still has a little bit of fighting left in him. I'd like to see him go like 2 or 3 more exhibitions. I think that'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, and I agree with you guys. I think, when you talk about the sport of boxing now, unless Fury or Wilder are on the card, it's not really talked about. So I would say Tyson come back for a couple more. Why not? He looked dominant. But other than that, we'll move on to some college football, and I just got breaking news, guys. Indiana quarterback Michael Penix out for the year with a torn ACL. Not what you want to see, but we'll hop right into some game recaps from Week 12. So first we'll talk about the Ohio State-Indiana game. Ohio State holds on, avoids the scare, 42-35. Penix and Freifogel, quite the connection that day. Ben, I'll start with you. Is this Ohio State team not as dominant as people think?
No, I think they're as dominant as people think. I think it's a complete roster. And look, every good team's worth one bad game or one bad half a year. So I think for Ohio State, this is probably their one bad game. So I think it's just a bad game. Everyone has bad games. I mean, Justin Fields has been phenomenal virtually every snap he's played as a Buckeye, except for, literally that last outing against Indiana. So I'm not worried.
Brendan.
Yeah, I think this happens with Ohio State every year. You kind of let a team hang around the entire game like they did with Indiana. This has happened with Michigan State, Penn State. They just let them hang around, but then end up winning the ball game, then going and crushing the rest of their opponents like they will this year. Now this year's different. They've got 2 games canceled, are in jeopardy of having another one canceled with their head coach testing positive. So that's not great. But I do think that they are as strong as they are. I do think that they're a top 4 team in the country. Julian Fleming and Master Teague are what they are as advertised, is what I'm trying to get at. Justin Fields is a top 5 quarterback in the upcoming draft. They should be fine the rest of their schedule and make the playoffs. I just think that this is their one mishap, and Indiana wasn't a pushover. It wasn't going to be a cakewalk anyways. So credit to Indiana for hanging around as long as they did.
Jacob.
I don't think they're as dominant as everybody says they are. That defensive line, I feel, is the main reason personally for me why they're not as dominant. I mean, you look at the past, they've had Chase Young and the Bosa brothers, so they're obviously going to wreak havoc on the defensive line. You don't have that this year. So their defense, to me, has taken a major step back. And Justin Fields, I know he's been great, but this was really the first time this season where he played a really, really good team in Indiana, which I got to admit, I wasn't expecting Indiana to hang around at all. So kudos to them. They're a lot better than what I thought they were. But Justin Fields did throw 3 interceptions against a real football team. So that kind of concerns me a little bit. I still have a lot of confidence in him. I think that he can turn it around and he's still going to be fine. But he's got to play better against the good teams. And I agree Master Teague is as good as advertised. I just don't feel like they have a good second running back, too. They normally have 2 really good running backs to back up their really great quarterback play. I don't feel they have that this year either. So really it's just the poor defensive line in my mind as compared to years past, not having really 2 running backs, and Justin Fields just simply has to play better against good competition. That's how I feel like right now they're not as dominant as people think they are. I still think that they're probably going to make the playoff, because I just don't think it's going to be as dominant of a way to get there.
And I'm glad
I agree. I agree with Jacob. Just in the fact that if you do put them up against Clemson or Alabama or Notre Dame, I don't think that they have a chance. I'm just saying that they'll crush the rest of their Big Ten opponents, but yeah, if they do get in the playoff, and I think that they will, they're first round loss.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think people keep hyping them up like they're a top 2 or top 3 team. I don't think they're a top 2 or top 3 team. I'd even question. This is going to be really unpopular. I don't even know if they're like a borderline top 5 team myself, just by the eye test for me. Like, I just haven't been blown away with them yet. So, and they really just played a great team in this game, and they just didn't show up as good as I expected them to. That's why I don't know if I'm necessarily fully convinced on them just yet.
I 100% agree with everything that was just said in the last few minutes. I'm glad I wasn't the only one that had to be a hater. I'm not saying they're a bad team. They went out to make the playoffs. But the defense definitely makes them susceptible to a first-round exit. If they throw 3 picks against a team like Alabama, Notre Dame, or Clemson, they lose by 2 possessions, without a doubt. If Fields throws 3 picks against either of those 3 teams, they lose by 14. And then also, I agree with, right now, they don't look like a top 5 team. I'd say Florida's playing way better than Ohio State right now. And I would say even Texas A&M. Kellen Mond and Kyle Trask are playing out of their minds right now. And I'd say they're both playing better than Ohio State right now. Clemson, with Lawrence, has been the much better team. They have that 1 loss to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's currently number 2 in the country. And I think Notre Dame and Alabama are playing better than Ohio State. So right now, I would have Ohio State at 6, maybe even 7 behind Cincinnati, who's playing a phenomenal season. And we'll get into the college football playoff rankings in a second, because there was a team that was definitely snubbed, and we'll get into it. But no, I don't think Ohio State. Brendan, stop shaking your head. I don't think Ohio State is as dominant as people think. And I think this last week showed, I agree with the exact point. Fields played a defense. He played a defense and threw 3 picks. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this next week. Michigan State coming off a big win. So we'll see. Maybe Michigan State can bring the heat. I doubt it. I think Ohio State has 2 easy games ahead of them. But you never know with Michigan State and then the game. So we'll see as we go forward. But we'll keep talking about Week 12 Big Ten action here. As number 19 Northwestern upsets number 10 Wisconsin 17-7 2 weeks ago. Does this prove how level the Big Ten is this year? Jacob, I'll start with you.
I think it's only level just because of the whole COVID situation. You look at Wisconsin, they had so many games canceled. I just saw now Northwestern's having their game this week canceled. Ohio State's had cancellations. Maryland's had cancellations. I just think it's been hard for the Big Ten, really, to get in a full rhythm just because they started the season super late. Now they're having all these different cancellations and all these different outbreaks. So that's why I think it's kind of level because, really, I feel if Wisconsin doesn't get their games canceled, I think that they beat Northwestern, and I think they're more of a competition for Ohio State. They've just been so devastated by COVID that I feel like their whole season's just been thrown off. And the Buckeyes could very well have their season thrown off if they continue to have cancellations. Maryland was on a roll, and then they just started getting cancellations too. And now, like I said, with Northwestern getting canceled this week, I mean, I just think it's hard for a team to get in a rhythm, which is why the Big Ten seems so competitive this year.
Brendan.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jacob that it definitely has been hard to get some momentum with Wisconsin and Northwestern to really get they haven't had a full season. Cancellations definitely hurt. You got guys in there. Wisconsin didn't have their number 1 quarterback playing and such. But I mean, you just look. Now Northwestern lost to Michigan State this past weekend. Michigan State was the worst scoring offense in the conference. It's definitely a testament to just show that the Big Ten has been the conference most impacted by COVID, which is disappointing because, Penn State, I think COVID definitely taking a hit to their team. And the reason that they have been 0-5 and now 1-5, Rutgers has hung around with some of the blue bloods of the conference, like Michigan and Penn State, which was crazy. So they're kind of having a good season. It's kind of crazy how Wisconsin beats Michigan and then loses to Northwestern, but then Northwestern loses to Michigan State. It's just been a crazy conference. I think it's just a 1-year thing. Normally this conference is, one-sided with Ohio State and Penn State and Wisconsin. But now you got some teams like Iowa trying to hang around. Purdue has had a good season. It's definitely leveled out for anyone's Big Ten taking. Anyone can win this championship. Which I think is ultimately going to be Ohio State. But it's just been a crazy conference to watch.
Ben?
Yeah, I think COVID's definitely easily done the most damage to the Big Ten. I think that's a big reason why things are so level this year because you have so many cancellations, players opting out. I know Penn State's had a player or two that was pretty high up there as far as prospects for the NFL go that just said, I'm not going to play. So I think that players having to sit out, it's just been a wacky year. Penn State 1-5, and they should have been up there competing with Ohio State for that Big Ten East crown in a trip to Indianapolis to play for the Big Ten title. I think ultimately Ohio State will win it, but they're really going to need to get these next 2 games in, or just pray that the average number of games per team in the Big Ten falls below 6 so they can still qualify in it, though. Everyone in the Big Ten is playing that week. So it doesn't really matter if they're playing for the trophy. But, man, this has got to be an indictment of how bad a commissioner Kevin Warren is in the Big Ten. If they had started 2 weeks earlier, we probably wouldn't be having as much discussion as we are about cancellations.
Yeah, and I agree. The cancellations is the big thing. And could you imagine if Ohio State does have one more cancellation and that doesn't dip below that number? You have a Big Ten title game where who would it even be at that point? It'd be teams like Iowa versus who is second in the East right now?
It's Indiana at 5-1.
The East is so bad.
It would be Indiana, but they could fall off with Penix being out now. It'd be weird to see. But if everything plays out normally, obviously I think Ohio State's the favorite to win that conference. But we'll see.
Right now, it'd be Ohio State against Northwestern in the championship.
Yeah. But we'll see. So that takes us now to a little bit of Week 13 action. The number 2 Irish, they avoid a trap. As everyone was saying, this was the biggest game left on their schedule. They take down North Carolina 31-17 on the road. North Carolina ranked 19th. Have a quarterback in Sam Howell who is getting a lot of looks at. Hopefully he's better than Trubisky. But we'll see. After the game, though, after the Friday afternoon win, or Friday evening win, Kirk Herbstreit comes out and says that Notre Dame is the most complete team in college football. Brennan, I'll start with you. Do you agree with Herbstreit?
Well, that was before Alabama took it to Auburn.
Yeah.
So I think they're definitely kind of even teams for that number 1 spot. They definitely have a lot of more strengths and weaknesses. I think Notre Dame, I think they have the better quarterback and the better running back. I think Alabama has the better defense. So, Notre Dame, that game against North Carolina, Ian Book just playing backyard football with the Tar Heels. That shovel pass for the first down was crazy. Avoids 3 sacks and then scores a touchdown. I don't know why he's not more in a Heisman conversation. I know you got the guy from Florida and Trevor Lawrence, obviously. So it's definitely tough competition, but I definitely think he should be talked about more for the Heisman. But Notre Dame, every week they seem to be getting better. Every week they definitely face a little adversity in the beginning of their games. Boston College had a nice start. North Carolina had a nice start. But they definitely make adjustments. Brian Kelly has done a great job with his adjustments, definitely in the second half, to not even let the other team have a chance. So, North Carolina, Notre Dame and Alabama definitely fighting for that number 1 spot heading into the college football playoff standings this week.
Ben, is Notre Dame the most complete team in college football?
I don't think so. I think it's Clemson. I honestly think it's Clemson. I think Notre Dame, their offense, I think they've settled in as it went on, but early on in the year, it seemed like you could kind of flip a coin and see how good they were going to be offensively. Defensively, they're really solid. But I think Clemson with Trevor Lawrence is the most complete team in college football.
Jacob?
I think that Notre Dame and Alabama are kind of like neck and neck. You can flip a coin to see who's better there. But I agree with Ben. Clemson is the more complete team than Notre Dame when they're all fully healthy and when Trevor Lawrence is there. I still just can't help but think that Clemson would have beat Notre Dame, in my opinion, had Trevor Lawrence been there, had their defense been fully healthy against the Irish. And obviously we're going to see who's better with the rematch that's hopefully going to be coming our way soon. But I just think when Trevor Lawrence is there, that offense is unstoppable for Clemson, and that defense has always proven to be good whenever it matters most with Brett Venables at the helm. He leads a great defense as a defensive coordinator. So I just feel that Clemson right now is still better than Notre Dame, although Notre Dame can definitely prove me wrong if they beat them in a rematch.
And Jacob, this is where we'll disagree. After watching that Notre Dame game, I'm not sold that – I'm not saying that Lawrence will come out and lose to Notre Dame in the championship game, the ACC championship game. But I'm saying if Lawrence was the quarterback in that game, I don't see him having much better of a game than Uiagalelei had. Uiagalelei threw for over 400 yards.
You guys gave up 47 points to us. I don't know how you can argue that your defense is as good. You guys almost lost to Boston College.
The defense was injured during those 2 weeks, and they had a couple suspensions there. So if they get fully healthy, I'm just saying, a fully healthy Clemson team, I think, beats a Notre Dame team.
But what I'm saying
Notre Dame is definitely good. I think Notre Dame can definitely.
We've had injuries and positive tests too.
Hey, I'm not taking any of that away from you. I just think with Trevor Lawrence at the helm and a more healthy defense for Clemson, they can beat Notre Dame. That's just my opinion.
I think the big thing is the fact that Notre Dame's defense shut down Etienne. He had 28 yards on 18 carries.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the reason Clemson lost. Not because Lawrence wasn't there. Uiagalelei played a near perfect game.
I agree with that.
He didn't throw a pick.
Definitely did get shut down.
He didn't throw a pick.
I agree with that.
Etienne had a fumble. A receiver had a fumble. Uiagalelei's passer rating was almost perfect. But the fact that Notre Dame's defense shut down the run game was the reason they won that game. And I think when you're talking most complete team, I think Notre Dame's defense is top 10 in the country. And when Book's playing like he is, as he's gotten better every week, they're top 10 offense in the country. And therefore, I think maybe not the most complete team, but they're definitely one of the most complete teams in college football. And I think Clemson, obviously, I think the ACC Championship is going to be definitely a harder game for the Irish. But the fact that Kyron Williams was not shut down by that defense or North Carolina's defense, he ran for 400 yards against the two defenses that are the top of the ACC. Kyron Williams, I think, Brendan, you talked about Ian Book not getting respect for the Heisman. I think Kyron Williams is a running back that needs to get a little more respect because the numbers he's put up when nobody even heard of him before the season started blows my mind. But, I mean, Kyron Williams and Ian Book ran and threw all over that defense of Clemson's. Yes, they had a few injuries, but Notre Dame also had missing players in that game as well. And I think, like Brendan said, each week Ian Book is getting better. And I mean, we saw the North Carolina game. Look at the flick of the wrist. But Book's becoming a quarterback that's getting on the not only the radar of Heisman looks, but I think he's improving his draft stock greatly through these last few weeks.
Also, Trevor Lawrence, not having played for a month, I think is going to come back to hurt him in a really contested game and against the best defense that he'll have faced all season long with Notre Dame. Ian Book will have been played every week, and in football, you need momentum and consistency to just continue to play at a high level that you can. Yet Trevor Lawrence won't, falter against Clemson Pittsburgh or Virginia Tech, the lower tier teams in the ACC. But after not having played a month, going into a really tough game against Notre Dame, you might be a little rusty.
Yeah, I think the two best defenses on Clemson's schedule this year were Notre Dame and Boston College, and he missed those two games, which I think are going to be huge when it comes to playing that Irish defense come the ACC Championship.
Yeah, I see both of your guys' points, and they're really good points too. But, I mean, it's just a personal opinion of mine. I just think Clemson's proven over the years that they're just champions. I think that they're going to show up when it matters most against Notre Dame. I think it's going to be a super close game, just like the first game was. But I just think Clemson in the end is just going to get maybe by a touchdown, if even, over Notre Dame. I think they're very close. I just right now, personally, just take Clemson slightly over Notre Dame.
And I'll say this, Jacob. Your boys in Cincinnati, that's their worst nightmares if Clemson wins a close game over Notre Dame.
That's true.
That probably means both ACCs represented in the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
So
hopefully, need Cincy to play BYU. I'm crossing my fingers that game somehow gets scheduled.
Yeah, because BYU will shellac them. Anyways, we'll move on. Oregon State takes down number 15 Oregon in a rivalry game, 41-38. I don't know what they're calling that game. What did they change the name to? It's no longer the Civil War because that was seen as controversial. So they changed the name of the rivalry game. I couldn't find it, but Oregon State takes down Oregon in the big game in Oregon, 41-38. Is the Pac-12 done? Do they have any chance at representation in the college football playoffs? Jacob, I'll start with you.
Personally, I think no, but I think the slimmest chance they have is if USC can win out, which I still don't think USC necessarily gets in the playoff. I just think the Pac-12, when it comes to the other Power 5 conferences, is by far and away now the worst Power 5 conference because all the teams in the conference, to me at least, over the past few years, have just been so even with each other, and none of them are like superstar good. They're just pretty good teams, decently good teams, and they all just fight with each other, and they all beat each other up in the process, and that's how they never get in the playoff anymore. I think that's going to be the case again this year because, honestly, I can see USC losing 1 or 2 games down the stretch. So I think, yet again, the Pac-12 is not going to have any representation.
Ben, Pac-12 done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Pac-12 was done before they started their COVID season here in 2020. I mean, the highest-ranked team was Oregon, 15 in the playoff rankings. They lost, so they're going to drop. SC's sitting at 18. And with only 2 more regular season games left now, they'll probably make it to the Pac-12 championship game. They're up there in a tie with Colorado, as they're the 2 unbeatens over in the Pac-12 South. I mean, that's 3 games. I think it's hard to go up as many spots and jump as many teams as they're going to need to jump in the next 3 games, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it.
Brendan?
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing to not have any Pac-12 in contention this year. Like Jacob said, they definitely do beat up on each other. USC is the best case scenario to get a team in, but even then, not having played as many games as the SEC or ACC will have, USC 3-0. Even looking at talent level, I just don't think that they're up to the challenge to beat an SEC team, or an ACC team. I just think that, the years of Oregon being a top 5 team, or I remember Washington made the playoff, and then who did they lose to? Michigan State or something like that? I think they lost to Clemson maybe. But those years are gone. Oregon can't even beat Oregon State anymore. So, I don't think they have a shot this year.
It's funny that you said that because I was literally going to say right after you were done talking. Do you guys remember when Washington made the college football playoffs? But, it slips through everybody's mind. I think they played Alabama, but they got – it wasn't a bad game. I think it was like 24-7.
Alabama, yeah.
But it was just that one year where Washington put it all together and they made the playoffs. But I think the Pac-12 is done. USC, Washington, and Colorado are the only 3 undefeated teams left. Colorado and Washington, not even in the initial rankings, and USC all the way down. Where'd they come in? 18, correct? Yeah, 18. I don't know. I think it's a tall hill to climb when you're talking about teams like Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson, even Florida, Cincinnati. I think they've already put much more on their resume due to having the lengthier season. So I think it's done for the Pac-12. I don't think USC has a chance, nor does the Pac-12. And this takes us now to the Big Ten. Number 8 Northwestern, they come off a hot win against Wisconsin, and it does not last long as Michigan State knocks them off 29-20. Ben, I'll start with you. Is it Ohio State or die for the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think Ohio State's the only team in the Big Ten that really has a chance to make it in. Indiana, you could make an argument. They were looking pretty good with Penix Jr., but with him out with a torn ACL, they're probably going to drop off. And to be honest, Northwestern just lost. They're going to drop. I mean, it's tough seeing another team in the Big Ten be able to do enough in the little time they have left. It's the same situation as USC in the Pac-12. I think outside of Ohio State, no one else in the conference has enough time to build enough resume to get them even to that 4 spot.
Brendan.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ohio State is their only chance to get into the playoff, and I think they will. I don't see any other. Indiana lost to Ohio State. Northwestern lost to Michigan State. Wisconsin isn't eligible even for the Big Ten championship game. So yeah, it's pretty safe to say that Ohio State is their only hope to get into the playoff.
And Jacob.
Yeah, I agree. Ohio State's by far the only team that can make the playoffs now. but they got to be careful with it. If they get another game canceled because of COVID, I don't necessarily see the Buckeyes really getting into the playoff anymore. They just need to hope that they get this all under control, play out the rest of the season, win the last 3 games, and they should get in no problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's Ohio State or die for the Big Ten, and it's not even certain that they're in. A lot of analysts, experts are saying, and I like to consider us experts in our own way, but ESPN and all of them are saying, even if Ohio State gets another cancellation that dips below, is 5 games even enough? Can you put a 5-win Ohio State team with their biggest win being Indiana, who's now going to fall off because of Penix being out, over 9-1 Florida team or 11-0 Cincinnati team? Like, can you put the resume's not there? I mean, you know how much harder it is in college football to go 11-0 than 5-0? Even if your schedule's a little weaker, to win 6 more games, it's a feat in its own. And that's what they're talking about. That's what they're talking about. Is it even enough?
That's why I said at the beginning of the year why they did not choose this year of all seasons to expand the playoff to 8 teams, because you had to know that you were going to have this situation arise.
Yeah, do what the
all
MLB
these
did.
Cancellations.
MLB extended.
The
MLB extended. The NFL also came out.
Yeah.
The NFL also came out and said if they have to cancel the season and jump right into the playoffs, they're going to do 8 teams instead of 7. So I think I agree.
College football playoffs they're making a headache for themselves here. But I mean, they always talk about the eye test. So Ohio
the defense for Ohio State
to win the eye test.
The defense for Ohio State has not passed my eye test. Fields in the first 3 games, that offense passed the eye test. The 4th game, but the defense in all 4 games, honestly, in my opinion, has not passed the eye test. They give up 27 to Rutgers. You put 11 of me out on the field, I'm holding them to 21. So they're not getting away with the hook and ladder, I'm telling you now. But no, it's going to be interesting to see how this season plays out. There's so much uncertainty going forward. It's so hard to make predictions. But the only way we find out things is by seeing them happen. And speaking of the college football playoffs, we'll jump in now. The initial rankings released last Tuesday. The second release will be tomorrow night. So with us having this podcast on Mondays, we'll kind of make our predictions where we see changes happening. And we'll also talk a little bit about last week's. I'm going to start with talking about last week's. So obviously we know the top 4. Bama's 1, 2 Notre Dame. They put Clemson at 3 and Ohio State at 4. It was the same reiteration. They didn't look good against Indiana, and they've only played 4 games. The first 2 out were Texas A&M and Florida, no surprise. Cincinnati at 7. And the biggest snub of the college ball playoffs initial release, BYU ranked at 14th, is so disrespectful because they literally put BYU and Cincinnati's resumes next to each other, and BYU's is better. BYU's strength of schedule was 61st, Cincinnati's was 68th, and BYU's point differential was like 33.5 points per game and differential. I don't know. Jacob, what are your thoughts on the initial release? Do you agree with me that even if you don't put them ahead of Cincinnati, they should have at least been 8?
BYU should have been 8 or 9. I can see why they put Northwestern at 8 just because they were undefeated at the time. So I would say
BYU's 9-0.
BYU at 9.
Best record in college football.
Hey, I understand, but Northwestern, like how Brendan's always been talking about these past couple of weeks, Northwestern's in the better conference. I could see how you put an undefeated Northwestern team at 8, then BYU at 9. I personally think Cincinnati and BYU should always be right next to each other, so they definitely did get disrespected. Everyone's been talking about the top 4 too, how they think it's wrong that Ohio State's 4. I don't see how it's wrong at all. No. They definitely deserve to be 4 in my eyes. And at 5 and 6, here's my take. Like, I understand why it's 5 and 6. I just don't see Texas A&M. I don't think is going to make the playoff at all because they don't have a chance to play Alabama again. They already lost to Alabama, and Florida definitely has a better shot at making it because they can play Alabama in the SEC championship and beat Alabama and get the playoff. So, but I understand completely why it's 5 and 6. But yeah, BYU got totally disrespected. I think it's so wrong how they disrespect all these non-Power 5 schools. And even though I think my Bearcats are still a little bit better than the Cougars, the Cougars definitely deserve to be right up there with the Bearcats.
Brendan. Actually, no, Ben.
No, I think-
Ben, you go first. Ben, you're up. We'll let Brendan steal a little bit more on BYU.
All right. I think the big surprise, I don't know how BYU is only ranked 14th in the first rankings. I think they should have been a top 10 team. I think they will be now after this week. They'll probably approach about that 10th spot, 9th spot, because Northwestern's going to drop out. The top 4 is probably going to stay the same. Texas A&M's probably going to hold. Florida's probably going to hold. You could probably flip 5, 6, Florida and A&M. Cincy, they didn't get to play last week, so they probably hold pretty much, maybe slide back a spot. I think pretty much that top 10 probably doesn't change a whole lot this week, except you probably see, obviously, Northwestern drop out and BYU maybe slide up in there.
They're giving way too much respect to Georgia and Oklahoma, in my opinion. Just had to add that. Brendan, what are your thoughts?
Your comment just about Georgia right now, I'm kind of in agreement with. I think they should be lower than Miami and Oklahoma. Take a look at the top 4. I think I'm in agreement with Jacob. I think if Florida is able to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, they might squeeze past Ohio State, or whatever happens with Notre Dame and Clemson in the ACC championship.
The craziest
Florida
scenario, Brendan. Sorry to interrupt, but the craziest scenario would be Clemson beating Notre Dame in a close one and Florida beating Alabama in a close one, because then you would consider 4 one-loss teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's why that kind of scenario with the SEC and ACC is really interesting, because then what do you do with Ohio State? Again, that's why it should be 8 teams. But then you go to Cincinnati. Fine, leave them at number 7. They've beaten everyone that they have to so far. But BYU is right where they should be. This is just a testament to the College Football Playoff Committee saying we don't want an independent like BYU in our concert. You shouldn't be there. You can't beat Alabama. You can't beat Notre Dame. You can't beat Clemson. You take a look at the top 13 teams ahead of them. They're not beating any of them. You can't beat Georgia. You can't beat Florida. You can't beat Oklahoma, because Oklahoma has been playing much better than when they lost to Kansas State. Since they beat Texas, they're much better. Iowa State is much better than BYU. They just beat Texas. Give some love to Matt Campbell. You can't beat Georgia. Georgia's an SEC team. They have way better talent than BYU. So the committee's saying, hey, BYU, great, you're 9-0, but you would kind of, this is kind of like having to say no to the ugly girl who wants to take you to prom. You're a great person, but we don't want you. We have a reputation to hold. This is
bad reputation.
Biggest. What was that?
A bad reputation.
Playoff committee?
I would argue that this BYU team this year would put up a better fight than the Oklahoma team last year against LSU.
They would still lose.
Oh, I'm not saying nobody would beat LSU last year. LSU was that team of destiny. That's not my point.
The top 4 teams is about getting the best 4 teams in all of football.
If you put LSU on a 129-game season last year, they would have won them all.
They're not even a top 10 team.
There you are. You're not even a top 10 team.
That was bad, but okay.
I don't know.
This is why I keep saying, Power 5, separate yourself from the group of 5. Power 5, have your own playoff. Group of 5, do your own thing like the FCS does.
We don't want BYU to dominate everybody.
But
my Bearcats will come and take out BYU.
Okay. I'm sold that BYU would beat Cincinnati.
I want to see it happen. I think
Cincinnati didn't look that good against UCF.
I agree with that.
Didn't BYU say no to someone like we don't want to play you guys?
Yeah, it was Washington, I think.
They'd beat
So
Washington.
they're scared of playing Washington?
That's not why. They didn't want to embarrass Washington on live television.
Man.
But no, now we'll jump into what changes we see happening. You guys already kind of touched on your guys' changes. 1 through 4 probably sticks. 5, 6 we talked about maybe a flip flop, but not much. Texas A&M did beat Florida. That's Florida's 1 loss, but Florida has the chance. Texas A&M doesn't. 7 will probably stick. Northwestern will fall. I believe Miami and Oklahoma should jump Georgia. Indiana's going to be interesting to see where they rank them. Yes, they won, but they also lost in the sense that they lost their starting quarterback. How does that weigh in on the voters? Iowa State with a huge win over Texas. Hopefully they maybe get a little more respect, maybe in that top 10 in BYU as well. Oregon going to fall. Other than that, Texas is going to fall as well. North Carolina may fall out. Auburn will fall out after their loss to Alabama, but nothing changing in the way of the top 4 and first 2 out, I don't think. And now we'll take a look at Week 14 for college football. Any upset specials or game of the weeks for you guys? Brendan, I'll start with you since I made you wait to rant about BYU.
Game of the week is definitely Texas A&M and Auburn. I know it's not, Auburn got destroyed by Alabama, but Texas A&M needs the win to keep themselves kind of alive. And then, that's Liberty and Coastal Carolina play each other, which should be an interesting one. Liberty
18-1.
Liberty kind of lost. They lost to NC State a couple weeks back. That ruined their undefeated season, but that's still a big group of 5 matchup. But then upset specials of the week. Michigan State has a chance to knock off Ohio State just because they beat Northwestern last week. I don't think it will happen. And then, that's pretty much it. I don't see any. West Virginia, they play Iowa State, but Cyclones are playing their best football in a long, long time. So that's it for me.
Ben.
I mean, when I look at the slate, there's no upsets really out here that jump off the page as possibilities. But game of the week, I got to go with the 9-1 Liberty Flames at the 9-0 Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Both teams having probably the best season each program's ever had. And a year with a lot of Power 5 programs that haven't had great years. Honestly, that's probably the best game on this week.
Jacob?
Well, if you would have told me that Alabama and LSU, when they would play the year following LSU's incredible season, that it would be an 8-0 Alabama against a 3-4 LSU, I would have thought you were crazy. So that would have been my game of the week had LSU actually been good. But my game of the week stays in the SEC. It is Texas A&M Auburn, and honestly, I feel Texas A&M is on upset alert with Auburn, especially because they have to travel there. And I'm expecting Bo Nix to have a bounce-back game and potentially lead Auburn to a victory over Texas A&M. I also do think the Buckeyes are on upset alert, and I think that's mainly because Rocky Lombardi for Michigan State, he either has the worst game possible or he has the best game possible. And he had a great game last week against Northwestern. He can maybe bounce back and do that with the Buckeyes as well. So I think that the Buckeyes should really be on upset alert this week. And I think West Virginia can definitely beat Iowa State. West Virginia is a tough team. Iowa State, yeah, they are really good, but I just think West Virginia can potentially get over the hump and beat them. And I don't know if this necessarily counts as an upset anymore just because Michael Penix Jr. is hurt. But I did have on here Wisconsin beating Indiana as a potential upset, even though that's not even that much of an upset, even if Penix is there because Wisconsin is good. But, yeah, I don't think there's necessarily any games that, blow my mind this week. Coastal Carolina and Liberty, like from record standpoint, does look amazing, but it doesn't really have any implications for the playoff. So I just think Texas A&M and Auburn is going to be a real slugfest, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that game.
Yeah, I agree. Texas A&M Auburn game of the week, with Wisconsin Indiana being second best game of the week. Upset specials, I agree. Michigan State could beat Ohio State, and I think Virginia Tech could beat Clemson. Virginia Tech, always that team. I mean, remember when Ohio State won the national championship? Who beat them that year? Virginia Tech. They're always a team that plays scrappy football. They're always in close ones. Their record may always be 6 to 8 wins in a 12-game season, but it seems like they battle in every game. I still think Clemson pulls it off, but I think it may be closer than anticipated. Other than that, I mean, I think Alabama and Notre Dame should handle their opponents pretty easily. Florida should handle Tennessee. And as the list goes down, I mean, Georgia shouldn't have a problem with the 0-8 Vanderbilt Commodores. But we'll see as this weekend plays out, as we get closer and closer to conference championship week and then the final announcement on who's in, who's out. But with that, it will take us now to the NFL, as we're not going to do any game recaps because there's a lot that's happened in the last 2 weeks. We'll just talk about some breaking news, the playoff picture that's formed over the last 2 weeks, and week 14 as we look ahead. Now, looking at breaking news, the Detroit Lions fire Matt Patricia after back-to-back losses lead to a 4-7 record. Jacob, we'll start with you. Who do you think should be on the radar for the Lions? Who do you think the Lions should have on their radar as far as future coaches or the next coach?
Well, my only coach that I really have them having on their radar, they should have on their radar, is a guy that should have had a job a long time ago, in my opinion. And that's Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. I look at the Lions roster, and I know Matt Stafford kind of gets a bad rep, but he's really not that bad of a quarterback,
No.
In my personal opinion. I think they have plenty of good running backs with DeAndre Swift, Adrian Peterson. Kerryon Johnson, everyone forgets, was a good back, and then he, of course, had the devastating injury, so he's bouncing back from that. I think T.J. Hawkinson's the real deal at tight end, and they have guys like Kenny Golladay at receiver that's definitely explosive. So the Lions have the offensive weapons that should definitely make them have a better record, in my opinion, than what they actually are. And I think if you bring in an offensive genius like Eric Bieniemy, he can definitely come in and really get the best out of that group. And not necessarily saying the Lions would be a contender with him there, but I think their offense would function better. And I think as a result, their record would definitely be better with Bieniemy at the helm.
Brendan?
Yeah, there's a couple I definitely agree with Bieniemy. You need an offensive coordinator in there to get that offense back on track. It's just been dismal, and a lot of love for Matt Stafford for going through a couple coaches now in his time in Detroit, 9 years now. Just a workhorse for the Lions, and it's just consistently been a solid quarterback. So you need an OC in there, and what Bieniemy has done with the Chiefs, I think he can do with the Lions. A couple others is Brian Dable from the Bills. He's ran a solid offense there. A defensive coordinator that I think needs to get a chance at being a head coach is Robert Saleh from the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
He was in talks for the Browns coaching job every year that we need a new coach. I think he definitely needs a chance. I'm not even going to bring up Harbaugh for Michigan. I'm sure the Lions will look at him, but I don't think that he's the answer for where the Lions are at and need to get to.
Ben?
I agree. I think Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs should be one of the top candidates to get this job. They do have some pieces offensively, so they need to pick up some pieces, but get the right coach, the right GM in there. But Detroit's not super far away. I also think, honestly, Jim Harbaugh. I don't think Jim Harbaugh would be a bad choice because all signs seem to point that he's probably leaving Michigan sooner rather than later. He is a Michigan man. He played his college ball up there. So he's already kind of entrenched in that fan base in the Detroit, Michigan area. And he does have a track record of succeeding in the NFL. So I don't think it'd be a bad choice.
Yeah, I agree. Bieniemy and Saleh were the two that were on my radar. I like the Harbaugh pick, but that would be more next season than like mid-season hire. I think all of these would be more next season than mid-season hire. Obviously, as far as interim head coach, it's gonna be interesting who they decide to go with. As they technically are still in the playoff hunt because they are only 2 games back from that last spot, but it's not looking good. You fire a coach 11 games in, you're basically saying it's the end of the season. So I think Bieniemy and Saleh will be 2 guys at the top of the radar, which they've been in a lot of discussions in the last couple of years as far as coaching changes go. But when you talk about coming out of college coaches, Harbaugh really might be the only one that makes sense. I don't think Lincoln Riley's going to want to go to the Detroit Lions. So we'll see. But as for the Lions, it's a shame because this has always been my hot take. If Stafford was on the Bears these last 5 years, the Bears make the playoffs every year. I think the Bears are literally missing a quarterback. I think Stafford's a great quarterback. He's just been unlucky in the franchise he's been with. So in other news, the Ravens-Steelers game was supposed to be the marquee matchup of Thanksgiving. It's pushed to Sunday. Then now it's pushed to tomorrow night at 8 p.m. due to the COVID-19 outbreak happening in Baltimore and even now Pittsburgh, as they've had a couple positive cases. If this continues to where this game isn't played, what should the NFL do? Should we go straight into the playoffs? Or what do you guys think? Jacob, I'll start with you.
Well, for one, I think this game should be played. I think that the NFL needs to hold the Ravens really accountable for the outbreak because if you look at it, I just don't see how it's fair how they made the Broncos go out yesterday without a quarterback on their roster. And they're going to say to the Ravens, you started this outbreak, but we're going to reward you by keep moving your game back. So I just think that they need to really play this game or have the Ravens forfeit the game, honestly. But if this keeps happening in the future, I think you have to seriously consider if you want to finish out the regular season, maybe finding certain areas around the country to make little pods of bubbles. And then ultimately when the playoffs come around, you make just one big bubble where everybody's playing in it. But yeah, for this game, the Ravens definitely should be forced to play this game after what the NFL made the Broncos do. I understand the Steelers now are having an outbreak, but really they only moved this game back because the Ravens initially started the outbreak. So I think that the NFL, to hold true to what it's done this past week by making the Broncos play, they need to make the Ravens play, or else the Ravens just should forfeit the game, in my opinion.
Ben?
I agree. I think the Ravens need to be held responsible for this. Look, it's not hard to go from the facility to your house and back and forth every day. Wear your mask, be smart. So I'm honest. This might sound bad, but I really don't feel sorry for them, especially after they made the Broncos play yesterday, the league that is. I don't feel bad. I mean, there's things you can do that are pretty easy to keep yourself from getting this disease, to keep yourself safe, your family safe, your teammates safe. So I'm sorry. If you can't follow that, you need to be held responsible for that. And if they can't control it, I think they need to forfeit. Sorry.
Brendan.
Do better.
Yeah, they definitely need to get the game in, and they will. But yeah, this has happened a few times now. First with Tennessee. Tennessee ended up playing a Tuesday night game. Yeah, I don't know about forfeiting. That's not what the NFL really wants, especially between two teams fighting for a playoff spot with Pittsburgh and Baltimore, especially Baltimore fighting for a playoff spot. So you need to get the game in. But I think what the NFL has done through this year, they haven't canceled a game yet, which is really impressive. I know the MLB ended up canceling games, so not canceling a game is really what the NFL should just strive for these last 5 weeks. Get every game in the last 5 weeks. If you have to reschedule. But what Jacob alluded to as far as the bubble goes, I think that would really work for the playoffs. Have an NFC bubble, an AFC bubble, one stadium, play games from morning on Saturday Sunday night. That would be a great weekend of football, playoff football. Scheduling wise, it can work. But therefore, you wouldn't have, more positive cases. You have everyone in one city, which would be fantastic for every city that is. And then play the Super Bowl in Miami. Or no, that's not Miami. It's in where's the Super Bowl this year? New Orleans,
Tampa Bay.
I thought it was Tampa
Bay. I knew it was a Florida city. Okay, yeah, Tampa Bay. But play the games. That figure it out. Reschedule if you have to.
Yeah.
Just get it in.
I think this is a bad look for the NFL. It goes to show that they care a lot about ratings. They knew the Broncos-Saints game was an S, so they're like, go ahead, play. You don't have a quarterback. But for Ravens-Steelers, let's keep pushing it back till Lamar can play. Because Lamar is the league. I think it's a bit ridiculous. I think Baltimore should have to throw RG3 or Trace McSorley out there and have to play with what they have because they couldn't stay disciplined. Why penalize the Steelers and the rest of the NFL in the sense that if you can't keep your team healthy, that's on you. I mean, in a regular season, if Lamar Jackson had a concussion, they're not going to push the game back until his head's okay. I think it's the same thing as that. He's sick. Don't let him play. So hopefully it happens tomorrow night. If it doesn't, it continues to be a bad look, in my opinion, on the league. Now we'll hop into the playoff picture as Pittsburgh remains the top 10-0 as they wait to play tomorrow night, that 11th game. Kansas City is the 2 seed at 10-1. Tennessee moves into the 3rd spot after beating the Colts as they're now 8-3. The Bills drop to 4 as they're 8-3. Browns take over the top wildcard spot at 8-3. Dolphins the 6th spot at 7-4. Colts the 7th spot at 7-4. In the hunt, we have the Ravens at 6-4, the Raiders at 6-5, and the Patriots at 5-6, who hold on to a close one with the Cardinals to maintain in the hunt. In the NFC, the Saints. Let's talk about the AFC first. No, I'll say the NFC. Okay, 1st seed New Orleans Saints. They're 9-2. Still playing really well with Taysom Hill. Not even skipping a beat without Breeze. 2nd seed the Packers at 8-3. Seattle the 3 seed at 7-3 with the Rams lost. They play tonight. The Giants, the new 4 seed at 4-7. The Eagles also play tonight, so if the Eagles win, they'd move back into that 4th spot at 4-6-1. The 5 seed the Rams at 7-4. Buccaneers and Cardinals continue to slide as the Buccaneers are at 6 at 7-5. The Cardinals at 7 at 6-5. And in the hunt, the 5-6 Vikings, 5-6 Bears, 5-6 49ers, and then a couple 4-7 teams in the Lions, the football team, and the Falcons. Guys, how crazy are you expecting these last 5 weeks to be? And who in the NFC are you rooting for at this point to get that 4th spot? Brendan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, looking at the NFC picture, I don't see it changing much. I think some of these teams are locks already. As far as the NFC East goes, the Giants and Cowboys and Eagles, I don't know who. It looks like the Giants are going to finish on top of that division. Washington is there as well, but okay, who cares? You guys are all shaking your heads. The NFC East, who cares?
Go football team.
But the Cardinals are hanging on like a thread right there with the 49ers and Vikings on their throat. But I think, the NFC is pretty much locked in right now with 5 weeks to go.
Jacob.
So looking at the AFC race, I think that each team that's leading the division right now is ultimately going to end up winning the division. I wouldn't have said that before the Titans absolutely took a beatdown on the Colts yesterday. I thought the Colts had a shot at winning the South, but I think now Titans are going to end up holding on and winning the South. As far as the wild card goes, it's crazy for me to say. I'm probably going to jinx them by saying it, but I think the Browns are almost a lock-in to get into the postseason. But other than that, I think the Dolphins, Colts, and Ravens are all going to be battling it out super hardcore these last 5 weeks. I ultimately think the Ravens are going to get a spot because looking at their schedule, they have the Steelers this week, difficult opponent, obviously. They have the Browns coming up. That can be a challenge for them. But other than that, it's four easy teams. They should take care of business. So I think with their schedule, they'll end up making the playoffs, which then leads it to the Dolphins and Colts. I honestly don't know who would make it between those two teams. That'll definitely be fun to watch. I agree with Brendan. The NFC race, I think, is almost set. I would say maybe the Rams still can potentially overtake the Seahawks to win the West, but after yesterday, I'm not as confident on that take anymore. And maybe potentially the Vikings can get it going and pass the Arizona Cardinals, but I don't see that happening either. So I think that most of the teams are just heading there. And as far as the NFC East, I would really want to see the Washington football team win the NFC East. I think they're going to win the NFC East because I love Chase Young. I love really a lot of guys on that defense for Washington. I think Antonio Gibson is emerging as a pretty good running back, so I think he can help the team out. I just want to see Alex Smith make the playoffs. That'd be such a great story. And I would have said the Giants too. I would have agreed with Brendan, but Daniel Jones could supposedly be hurt for the next couple of weeks. That's what the rumor is with that hamstring injury. Talking about he could miss next week, could miss a couple of weeks. They don't know yet for sure. So if New York's beat up, I don't see them necessarily winning. I don't have faith in Carson Wentz or Dallas to really challenge Washington. And I just think Washington's going to play inspired behind the greatest story ever in Alex Smith, and they're ultimately going to win the division, hopefully.
Ben.
I really don't see this playoff picture changing that much, to be honest, at this point. I think the AFC is going to be pretty boring down the stretch. Maybe a team, some shuffling there with the wild cards, but nothing major. In the NFC, I think that race for that last wild card could be something to watch the last couple weeks because you got 3, 5, and 6 teams just one game out of that last spot there. The Cardinals currently hold at 6 and 5. That could be someone to watch. And out of the NFC East, I want to see Washington get out of the NFC East. I want to see Alex Smith take a team to the playoffs. That'd be a tremendous story, tremendous comeback story after everything he's been through. He's not been playing bad either.
No, I'm in agreement. The AFC, I think, it's going to be those last 2 spots that are up for grab. NFC, I think everything's set except for that 4 spot, which is the NFC East. Now, when I look at this, the Eagles' remaining schedule, so I think they lose tonight, so they stay at 3 wins. They lose to the Packers, they lose to the Saints, they lose to the Cardinals, they beat the Cowboys, and then lose to the football team. So I say they only win 4 games. Giants' remaining schedule is Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, Ravens, Cowboys. I see them only beating the Cowboys over those 5. And then for the football team, it's Steelers, 49ers, Seahawks, Panthers, Eagles. I think they can beat the 49ers, Panthers, and Eagles, which means with 6 to 7 wins, the Washington football team, the team without a name, wins the NFC East and gets that 4 spot. And I agree. When you look at these teams, I think Alex Smith's the best quarterback in that division. He's better than Daniel Jones. He's better than, who are the Cowboys? He's better than Andy Dalton. And he's better than Carson Wentz. I think Antonio Gibson's making a case with the lack of use of Ezekiel Elliott that Antonio Gibson might be the best running back this year in the NFC East. So overall, and I think Washington has the best defense of the 4 as well. So I think everything stacks in their favor, and that's who I'm rooting for to get that 4 spot in the division. So now we'll take a look at Week 14. Guys, favorite matchups of the week. Ben, we'll start with you.
All right, let me pull this up here. Honestly, probably just Week 14. Probably Ravens-Browns, that matchup in Cleveland in Week 14. That's probably the best one coming out here in that week, honestly. One with certainly the biggest playoff implications.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think Ravens-Browns, huge implications. That's going to be a good game. I'm really going to enjoy seeing the Pittsburgh Steelers and Buffalo Bills play. I think that's going to be a great game. But the other two games that I have out in the NFC that I think are huge that some people might not want to talk about, the Cardinals and the Giants, both, in my opinion, are in must-win situations. The Cardinals to hang on to the wild card, the Giants to stay in the race for winning the NFC East. So that's a huge game, playoff implications. And same thing goes for the Washington football team playing the 49ers. 49ers want to stay in the hunt. Washington wants to stay in the NFC East picture. So really, those are just two must-win situation games, and I just think they're going to be fun to watch. It might be ugly football as far as the football team and the 49ers especially. Like, I don't necessarily see that being a fun game necessarily to watch, but as far as implications go, I don't think it could get much bigger for either one of those two teams.
Brendan.
Yeah, I'll definitely have my eyes on Ravens-Browns as well. But don't forget, you got this coming week 13, Titans and Browns, which can definitely impact where those two teams stand in going into week 14. Who knows if the Ravens will be able to beat Pittsburgh? I don't think they will. Bills and Steelers will definitely be a good one. Bills trying to clinch a playoff spot in week 14. Yeah, I definitely agree with Washington and San Francisco. And even some, losers faced off with each other as well. Dallas and Cincinnati. Is Dallas really as bad as we all say they are? Atlanta and LA. So, even New Orleans and Philadelphia, as the Eagles are trying to fight their way to the top of the NFC East. So,
I don't know if I'm the only one that's feeling this way, but I'm keeping my eyes on the Jets every week just because I want to see if a third team joins the 0-16 club. I know Brennan doesn't want to call it a club because the Browns made it a few years ago, but once there's three, it's a club.
No, it is a club. It will be a club.
It's a distinguished club. Not very many teams get to join. But
Jets won't be the last one either.
Nope. So that will
after
be
we fire Stefanski.
That will be all for episode 5, as now we jump into last call. And guys, we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. How was your Thanksgiving, and what was your favorite dish, and why? Jacob, we'll start with you.
So my Thanksgiving was, it was different. It was only just my mom, dad, sister, and I. Had a lot of food, and I'm a big eater, so I really enjoyed that. My favorite dish is always stuffing. I don't really know what it is about it. It's just I can eat it all day, every day. So, and my dad made it really good, so that was always enjoyable. And green bean casserole. I love green bean casserole too, so that was enjoyable. But it was just good to be home with the family. And all in all, given the circumstances, it was a good Thanksgiving.
Ben.
It was a Thanksgiving, smaller, significantly less people, but it was good. It happened. It was solid. We'll take it. Favorite dish is probably pumpkin pie. We're talking dinner, probably stuffing.
Okay.
Stuffing just hits.
Brendan.
Yeah, definitely a smaller Thanksgiving than usual. But it felt the same still. Sit on the couch, watch football until you have to go to eat dinner, and then go back to the couch and watch football again. So it's definitely exciting. I think Thanksgiving, this might be a hot take, but I think it's the most overhyped holiday on the calendar.
At least Riley's
as far
not
as Thanksgiving, here. That's right, he does like Thanksgiving.
Gravy train.
But as far as food goes, the turkey was the best turkey I've had. My dad cooked it well this year. I don't know what he did, but it was solid. And then I agree with Jacob. Green bean casserole, you can't go wrong with it. So
Thanksgiving ham's better than Thanksgiving turkey. Nobody can change my mind. But
That's true.
But my Thanksgiving was weird, in the sense that I had to work. I was the bartender Thursday night. We were open 4 to 10. So, and all my mom's had dinner at 2, My dad's had it at 2:30, and so I went to their house, got carry-out containers of all their food, put it in the fridge, went to work, made a little bit of money, came home, and me and my sister, who both closed at B-Dubs that night, we ate together and had our own little Thanksgiving dinner. So it was definitely weird. Very small since it was just me, my sister, my fiance, and my nephew. I mean, my first question is, you guys call it stuffing, but it's dressing. It's only stuffing if it's cooked inside the turkey. So unless your parents cooked the dressing inside the turkey, it was not stuffing. But anyways, dressing or green bean casserole is probably my favorite dish as well. I think they're usually, when you talk about people's two favorite dishes, one of those two ends up in the top two for most people.
No, well, hold on here. A dressing is like gravy or barbecue sauce.
That's a condiment.
Stuffing.
Barbecue sauce is a condiment.
Okay, if you really want to get technical with it,
Gravy.
what do you put?
Ranch is a dressing.
All right, yeah, we're not going to go down that road.
Dressing is what you put on a salad, or it's what you make unstuffed from the turkey. It's called stuffing because you stuff it.
No, it's stuffing. It's always stuffing.
It's always stuffing. I've never heard dressing.
Yeah,
We're gonna search this up.
You're the only person I've heard say that.
Is it dressing or stuffing? We're searching it right now for the listeners and for us. There we go. The technical difference between stuffing and dressing is stuffing is a mixture used to stuff another food, traditionally a bird, before cooking, whereas dressing is cooked in a pan outside of the turkey cavity. Therefore, we all enjoyed a plate of dressing.
Well, I didn't enjoy it because it wasn't good. So.
Well, I'm sorry. My parents make very, very good dressing, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And then the pumpkin pie, I agree. The pie, I had pumpkin and chocolate. They were both phenomenal with ready whip. A lot of it, more whip than pie, but all in all,
some ice cream too.
True. Yeah.
All in all, it was a different Thanksgiving, but I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to stop by and at least see the family. And my mom really went all out because she knew we had to work. She bought carry-out containers for us and filled each one with an individual item. So I have a meat container, a dressing container, a green bean casserole containers. Pretty.
By the way, real quick, Detroit and Dallas have to stop playing on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they're not fun to watch.
Throw that out there.
Dallas, they both got shellacked. Washington football team's the new team of Thanksgiving.
That is one tradition that they have to get rid of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Pittsburgh-Baltimore would have been a good Thursday night game if, Lamar.
But do like what the NBA does on Christmas.
Yeah.
Have your best teams play.
Every year.
Not for losers.
Yeah, the NBA always does it perfect. They always got a Los Angeles team. New York, you always got to throw in there because everybody loves to watch the Knicks for whatever reason on Christmas, even though they get beat all the time. And then they throw in actual good teams playing against each other.
Like the Cavs Warriors one year. That's my thing, though. The NFL tries to do that with primetime games, and they've been very unsuccessful this year. A lot of the primetime games are snooze fests. So, I don't know. They almost had it right with Thanksgiving for the third game, but then it got pushed back. So, but that will be it. For Ben Johnson Bowers, Brendan Devaney, and Jacob Butar, I'm Will Brienza. We thank you all for listening to episode 5. Also, listening to 1 through 4. If you haven't, they are on this YouTube page as well, so go ahead and give them a listen. But we will continue to bring you sports coverage throughout winter break and the rest of the 2020-21 school year, and hopefully even after. So thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful week.